Hi, welcome to Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys. I'm a mental health nurse, a home birth advocate broadly, but also more specifically in the state of Victoria, and I'm an ex-student midwife. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. This is another Partner episode. Today, Robert, the husband of Sarah from episode 19, shares his perspective on home birth and his experiences supporting birth at home. It was so great to chat with Robert. We talk about home birth, the importance of being a foundational support in birth, the realities of risk, and the importance of asking, what does that mean when told your risk has increased, which is a common phrase within maternity care. And one of my favorite parts is the realization that yes, most expecting parents probably spend more time considering what car they will buy than about what their birthing options are. It's a thought-provoking episode and I know you'll enjoy it. Please do share this episode to get the word out there that these special episodes exist, and enjoy. Welcome, Robert, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here in your car studio. I was just telling Robert for the listeners that this isn't the first time that I've had someone record in their car. So thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. Do you want to give a bit of background about like who you are, where you're from? Obviously you're Sarah's husband, so that's awesome, but a bit more background information about who you are.
Hi, so I am a teacher. I have a bit of background in mental health and psychology, but I'm a dad of 2 now, and I live up in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. And we moved out of Sydney, got the hell out of Sydney at the start of 2023, about a month into a pregnancy. So
yeah,
big changes last year. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, amazing. So you have Addison, who's like 6.
Addison is now 6, yes.
Yep. And you have Quinton, who...
Almost 5 months.
Almost 5 months, yeah. Baby.
Baby.
Yeah, amazing. And so for listeners that might have listened to Sarah's episode, you would know that, hearing just that there's quite a big gap in Addison and Quinton. And I guess, also quite a difference in, birth stories as well. So I guess to start off with, Robert, like before Addison, so going back, 7 or so years, did you have like any ideas about pregnancy or birth or,
No, not really. It's not something you really gave too much thought into before starting that journey. And one of the things quickly we found out is that the wording in health insurance premiums can be a bit confusing. And when you think you're covered for one thing and you're not, and it comes out of a separate bucket, that sort of set the tone for the first pregnancy. I think we thought one thing and then there was something else, and it was a difficult pregnancy and a difficult birth. Not as bad as some, better than others. But still, it was part of the reason why there was such a big gap between Addison and Quinton. So going into that first pregnancy, there was a lot of learning that needed to happen very, very quickly.
Yeah. And for the listeners that haven't heard or listened to Sarah's story of the birth of Quinton, do you want to give a very brief summary of, like, from your perspective, the birth experience of Addison, or like the birth of Addison?
Yeah. So Sarah had some medical issues going into that pregnancy that caused her to be quite sick throughout the pregnancy, didn't work as much as she wanted to. And I think really hit our confidence going into that, to the end of that pregnancy. And one of the shining points out of that pregnancy was the continuity of care. We sort of fell into a midwifery program where we got a trainee midwife, and she saw us at every appointment and knew us, and because it wasn't a cookie cutter sort of stock standard pregnancy, and it didn't fit the mold for what the hospital wanted, and I think as a result, there was some trauma from that birth. It hit us both pretty hard at times during it and after it, and it took a little while to heal from. Having to negotiate with obstetricians, anaesthetists, midwives when you're going on 40 hours of no sleep, and trying to keep your wits about you was difficult. So that was the first pregnancy.
And so, we
learned.
You learn. So then Sarah becomes pregnant with Quinton, and had you put you yourself thought about how this pregnancy might be or how this birth might be, thinking about your pretty much only exposure to birth at this point is something that's kind of traumatic,
So we were kind of determined the second time round to learn what we learned from the first time round. Sarah more so than I. Did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting resources and research.
Yeah.
She had a much clearer idea of how she wanted to go, in terms of the continuity of care was really important. Like I said, we liked that. That was the one thing from that first pregnancy that worked. And it was so important. So we set out at the outset looking for that from the get-go. The midwife, that continuity of care, that consistency, that understanding us and what we wanted and our wishes, and to be respected that way. And so from the outset, that's what we wanted. We didn't necessarily want a home birth at first. All options were on the table at the start, but we knew what we didn't want, and we knew that birthing in the system needed to work for us. Whatever that was going to look like. And I think the point, for the second pregnancy, there was a point there where we weren't going to have another kid. And I literally was booked in to have the snip. And we were out by ourselves one evening, and we sort of just decided, do we really want to do this? Do we want to go through with this? So that's completely off the table. No more kids. And there was a reluctance there, and I think unless you're both 100% in, then it's probably a no. And so we talked it out, and we decided, well, are we actually really considering this? So I think by the end of the evening, we had a spreadsheet open with potential baby names. So
that's awesome.
So after that decision, then the next decision was, well, it can't be a repeat of what happened the first time. So we went into it this time around with a lot more forethought, consideration, and a little bit more confidence as well, I think, which helped.
Yeah. I guess, when you go into birth not really having any idea, there's 1,000 possibilities, but when you know what you don't want, then you can be like, well, I don't want that, and so it narrows down all of the possible options, I guess, that exist in the birth and pregnancy world. Do you remember like the first time that Sarah mentioned home birth to you?
We actually were talking about this the other day, and I can't remember that point when it came up.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at all options. We knew what we didn't want, and that meant we need to look outside of what was conventional. So it wouldn't have, I do know it wouldn't have seemed far-fetched to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can't remember the exact point in which it was brought up probably means that it was like, okay, that's on the table. Everything was on the table. It's another option.
Yeah.
And I think throughout the whole pregnancy with Quinton, we would examine everything that came up.
Yeah.
Talk about it, think about it, look at the risks, look at the evidence behind it, and then make an informed decision based on that. So yeah.
During the pregnancy with Quinton, when you decided that you would have a home birth with Quinton, whether, I guess, in that context, but also more broadly in the context of just having another baby, did you have any fears or particular things that you were like specifically worried about? Yeah,
so I know it came up. We'd met with our midwife, Ineka, at that point, and she'd taken us on. And she, if you ever get a chance to meet her, she's going to hate me for this, the perfect blend of medicine and hippie, or art and science, if you want to put it that way. For me, she was very, very clear at the outset of what she can and can't do. She'd take everything on board, but as soon as we stepped outside what she could ethically offer, she'd let us know where we approach those boundaries and those sorts of things. So look, after having met her and knowing that she was in our corner, I don't think really I had too many fears. I have a note here about, So look, at the outset, I knew I had all the typical fears about, like, what if something bad happens, emergencies, transfer to the hospital, and, all that cascade of interventions and all those sorts of things that come up and are sort of drummed into you via stories and media and things, because, if the heart of a good story is conflict, and, if it sells. Right. So, in terms of birth, what's the conflict going to be? It's going to be conflict with the body, conflict with the outcome, blah, blah, blah. So, but as you know, working in the mental health field, any sort of field related to psychology, 4 years of psychology behind me, and anyone that's done psychology knows that it's a little bit of theory about what goes on with people in the brain. Yeah. Most of it is statistics. Yeah. So when you sit down and consider what the actual risks are of these sorts of catastrophic events, they are so infinitesimally small. Yes, they do happen. Yes, they can happen. I had a friend who had a catastrophic event and lost their child with one of the state's best obstetricians. Yeah. In a private hospital. Yeah. They couldn't transfer them. Make the news. Didn't make the news. They couldn't, and in that situation, they couldn't get them to a public, the Westmead Children's in time. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So if it sounds really morbid and bad, but if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And there are certain situations where no matter what setting you're in, you might have a better chance of survival or a better outcome. But when you're hitting that pointy end of the curve, the odds are stacked against you anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, that came up to play, like, when we get to talk about the birth of Quinton, like the 38-week scan and the And doctors not knowing their statistics.
So much drama around scans. Oh my gosh. And so working with Aneka, so you felt like she was the main person that was able to help you overcome these fears, or I guess, or all of Sarah's research and education probably helped as well.
Yeah, both. Yeah. Those two things, like, you know, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And to be forewarned is to be forearmed. So,
yeah,
you know, if you know what the risks are, like, people will spend more time choosing a car than their birth options.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
They'll spend more time learning about the intricacies of a new vehicle than the options for a birth.
Oh my gosh, and all the safety features of the car, but you never like consider, oh my God, I'd never thought about it like that. Whoa.
So like if you're a partner and you're listening and you're like, you will spend more time considering what your next vehicle choice is than the birth of your child, usually.
Yeah, that's wild. Oh my God. I guess I'm going to use that like it's for everyone that ever questions home births. Like, how long did it take to decide on what car you bought? I know when I got my car, it took me like weeks to like figure out which car, what price, where you could get it from.
Test drive it. How does it feel?
Yeah.
Like, on paper, this car's better. But this one feels more right. Like,
yeah. And like, you can return the car at the end of the day, but you can't return a birth experience.
Nope.
Like, oh my gosh. And so talking about all of this ultrasound drama, do you want to give like a little overview of your understanding of what happened there?
So, yeah, Sarah was a little bit worried. Worried is the wrong word. Concerned because she hadn't really felt Quinton move as much.
Yeah.
There was a change in frequency and amount of movement, and like the kid's legs never stop now. I can only imagine what it was like in utero as well. And so we felt him keep really early, and you know, if you meet him, you wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
His little jalapeno baby just kicks around the whole time. And so, you know, when there was that decrease in movement, a little bit concerned. So, Aneka's like, well, what are your concerns? Would it make you feel better if you went for a scan? And we were like, yeah, let's err on the side of the caution. We're at 38 weeks. Let's make sure everything's all good.
Yeah.
And so Sarah's like, well, I can go in and have a full scan or just a little scan, because at 38 weeks, you can't really get the whole package in. Like it's really hard to get a full picture of the baby, as you'll know.
Yeah.
And they're notoriously inaccurate with certain measurements and things like that. So I'm like, look, and I kick myself for it now. But I'm like, I'll err on the side of the caution here. Let's just go for the whole hog. We're paying for it. Why not? Like,
yeah.
So, so that turned out to be a bit of a mistake. So we get this. I was on the road that day. I distinctly remember I was heading back into Newcastle across the bridge, coming from the north, coming up from Nelson's Bay.
Okay.
And I got a call from Sarah telling me about this scan. I'm like, oh, how's things? Is the baby, you know, still got a baby? And she's like, yeah, but like, and then she tells me like, it's like really small, and they couldn't find a kidney and all this stuff. I'm like, but that's weird because the 20-week morphology, everything was on track, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then that starts the ball rolling. So now we get flagged in the system. So there's suspected interuterine growth restriction.
Yeah.
So then hospital policy and procedure and state government policy and procedure starts to kick in. And so we start getting, you know, pressured into, well, all we've got to book you in for an induction. Like, you know, the baby's not thriving, the baby could die, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So we go, look, we'll get a confirmation scan first, please.
Yeah. Yeah, just hold up.
Hold up. Yeah. So we get the second scan, and it's the other end of the curve. So we've got a big baby now, not a small baby. Yeah. Still problem with the kidney. Still not sure. Couldn't really see that, but it's on a particular side where it was really difficult to see, even when they're out anyway. So then we get sent along for a third one eventually, after we kick up a bit of a stink, because we've got two conflicting results. What do you do? So you go for a third. And it fell sort of in between. So 3 completely different results, 2 from the same sonographer. So one of the things, I remember meeting with an obstetrician at the hospital, our closest hospital that we're booked into, and listening to them, and I was a little concerned, and I was thinking about, okay, so we'll set a time limit. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so I don't want to book in for an induction this Friday. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Like, we have incomplete information. Let's see how things go. Give some space and time to think. Yeah. They kept pushing.
Yeah, wow.
And I was not going to relent, but I was prepared to go home and have a really good long think about it, and if necessary, try and talk Sarah around to it, because until they mucked up their stats. Yeah. And in the interim between the scans, our midwife had sent me a whole bunch of peer-reviewed data, meta-analysis from Cochrane and a few other, and federal government data on risks associated. She wouldn't make, Sarah's like, can you just make the call for us? And she's like, I can't. You have to make the call. Yeah. And Sarah wasn't able to decipher some of the statistics. So, of course, I hope no one from work hears me. Instead of working, I spent 2 days of work time reading peer-reviewed medical journals. Yeah. And spending a bunch of time looking at their methodology and their statistics. And so one of the key things you need to know is, in general population, you have 2.7 deaths per 1,000 perinatal deaths. So anywhere from between 20 weeks and 44 weeks after they're out, right? Yeah. Perinatal is about 2.7, I think, from memory. This is a while ago, so don't quote me on these stats. So, to put it into perspective, out of every 10,000 pregnancies that get to 20 weeks, 27 of those kids will die. Yeah. All right. Add in the risks that we had, the risk factors we had, it bumps it up to 3.2, or 32 kids in 10,000. Yeah. Not a huge increase from where we're seeing.
I mean, like you've said before, it's like pretty morbid to be talking about, like.
But this is what we're faced with.
But that's what and that's what they scare you with. They say, oh, like your risk increases, or your risk doubles, or your risk is higher, or whatever. But actually, what does that mean?
What does that mean? Yeah. So I think I can't remember. Otherwise, I put in the formal complaint. But one of the OBs, or it was like either OB or one of them. There was two lady doctors we were talking to, and I shouldn't say lady doctors. 2 doctors we were talking to, and one of them said, like, you've got a 3% chance of death. I'm like, thank you for your time. Yeah, we'll take it under advice. Yeah, and so I knew where she was coming from, but she had no idea of what the stats meant. Yeah. Which kind of helped me make up my mind. And I think at that point, we'll just wait. Like, if movements are back, There's no other, like we've got data that's inconclusive.
Yeah.
And conflicting.
Yeah, and conflicting.
And look, don't get me wrong, like when things go wrong, I want an obstetrician in my corner. Like that's what they're trained
100%.
for.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
They are trained to deal with that pointy end of the curve where when things go wrong, you want them there. That's what they're trained for. But I think after having worked in education for so long and seen how it changes people and having relatives and people in the medical system and seeing how it sort of changes you, then they will see that they live through trauma every day. So you can't do that without 100%. It affecting your view. So they just want to avoid it as much as possible, and they will rely on these policies and procedures, some of which aren't up to date with the best science that's out there at the moment.
Yeah. And
some of them, because that's what they need to fall back on. And then the other thing that kicked around in the back of my mind was there was an article written in the New York Times in 2013. It's called "How Doctors Die."
Okay.
And again, this is really hugely morbid to be talking about. If you're listening to this and you're trying to, because that's what with the risk they're trying to avoid at all costs, like the death of a child. But one of the things that stuck with me when I read that was they don't use the system. They die completely differently to the general population. They know what the limits of medical science are. And they know what's important. They know when to call quits, refuse treatment, and then just spend the rest of their time that they've got the best way possible. Instead of using the system the way the rest of us do. So there's that inherent distrust again, I guess, about from the medical profession when it comes to risk of death.
Absolutely. Like I think like I work in mental health and I'm a nurse, and I've seen so many things where I'm like, oh God, like, even talking to a paramedic friend the other day, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe we're like living in such, like, you're sold one idea, but it's like actually completely different. And there's so many situations like, I want to be healthy and well, because being faced with the reality of like getting stuck in like the hospital system or getting stuck in emergency things, and like things are missed all the time. Like it's such a big system. That means there's bigger potential for things to go wrong.
And I think the thing to remember, it's a system, and it works from a systemic point of view. So what that means is it works well for a population, but not particularly for individual cases. So
individuals,
And I think for us, getting back to the start, that continuity of care, having that one provider, whether it be a private midwife, whether it be an obstetrician, whether it be even like, God bless Daisy, if you're listening to this, like you were the one bright light in the first pregnancy. So like having that one person that can help you navigate the system and make it work for you, I think is the biggest thing, biggest takeaway we had. So I think
absolutely.
we identified that early on.
So you have all of this scan drama at 38-ish weeks. How are you feeling like in the lead up to, preparing for a new baby to be in the house, and like also preparing Addison? Like, did you have any like worries or concerns about any of that?
Oddly calm for someone who has a tendency to be a little bit anxious and worrisome and get lost in their own head. Oddly calm about it all. We'd been prepping Addison to help out in the birth if necessary. kind of glad she wasn't there for it in the end.
Yeah.
Lots of screaming. But in the lead up, I was working with my team and they knew it was happening soon. So things were like taken care of work side, which is a huge ease of the mental load there.
Yeah.
And at home, like, I think Sarah was getting antsy about, like, it's never going to come, it's going to be so late, and if it goes too long, then I'm going to have to transfer anyway, and, like, all those sorts of things. I'm like, so we did what we did for the first pregnancy, which was made plans. Yeah. And, of course, as soon as you make plans and get about doing stuff that you wanted to do and ignore the pregnancy, like, the kid comes in.
Yeah.
And I think on the Monday, I was working from home and so I was like, my water's just broke. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Do we need to do anything? Is there anything accompanying with that? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, cool. I went back to work. I just let my team know, hey, my water's just broken. They're like, oh my God, do you need to go to the hospital? I'm like, no, there's no contractions. Labor hasn't properly started yet. Like, this could be, I'll work from home for the next 3 days. I'll put in a request for that. But other than that, like, we'll just sit and wait. So nothing happened that first day. The second day, early in the morning, I had the class, and then so I was online with them, and I just finished up like 2 minutes, and I was typing up some notes, and I get a call, and Sarah decided when I was in the class to take herself for a walk. Yeah. And of course, that's when labour started with a vengeance. Yeah. And she tells it better, but she goes, I need you to pick me up. So I run out, I get in the car, and I drive the way we always go for the walk. Every single time we have ever gone for a walk, we went one particular way. Of course, this time, she decides she would go in a different way.
Just change it up a little bit.
Just change it up.
Oh, no.
So I'm racing around this day. I go around up the street. She's not here. Maybe she went down that way. So I do a U-E, went back down the other possible way. We went one time. No, not there. And then, so I raced back all the way around the outside and ended up finding her. She went in the complete opposite direction we've always gone. And we're sitting on the side of the road there with a concerned neighbour poking her head out the window. So I got her in, and then active labour started. The midwife, of course, decided to take their kid out that day. Yeah. So she was in Newcastle, 40 minutes away, 40 minutes if there's no traffic. So she was speeding along the motorway after she got the call. Yeah. The second midwife, the backup midwife, was speeding along her way. They got here roughly at the same time. But in that time, Sarah had started labour and was begging me to call her an ambulance and take her to the hospital.
Yeah, really? Wow.
And I was like, it's too late. Yeah. Like, because we're regional. Yeah. By the time the ambulance gets here and they assess you and they load you up, you're giving birth on the side of the road. Yeah. Do you want to give birth in the ambulance on the side of the road? She's like, no. I'm like, right. So we've got to fill up the pool. And she goes, no. Don't start yet. And I'm like, you are clearly in labour. She goes, but I still might go to the hospital. I'm like, no, you're clearly in labour. We need to get this. I need to get this pool started so that I can focus on you when you're really, really in labour. Like, all over $70 because as soon as you open the liner. You've heard this story.
I was the same.
As soon as you open the liner, that's used.
It's gone. Yeah.
But if we don't use the liner, we get $70 refunded. Like, we've just blown how many thousands of dollars on the midwife? I am not
Worried.
Fussed over $70 liner. So she was against me opening the liner, and I just opened it in the bathroom. She says, "Oh, you've opened it." I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, too late now.
Too late now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if she remembers it that way, but yeah, that's how it happened.
Yeah.
So I finished pumping it up, getting the water in. She was transitioning on the bed. Midwife came, coaxed it into the pool. If you're planning a home birth, have a bath there, like a pool there. Like the way she tells it, it's night and day. It helps fight gravity. So everything becomes lighter, easier, and she went from having horrific pain to going into this. It was the coolest thing to watch, this trance-like, almost meditative state between contractions.
Yeah.
Gathering her focus, gathering her energy, and then working through. And within 2 hours, Quinton was born. So and we were holding him, and he was real, and a thing, and a person, like, sitting there. And it was amazing. It was a completely different birth experience.
Yeah. And it happened so quick. I guess, what was your what was going through your head when it was, like, actually happening? Were you thinking, like, oh my gosh, it's not been enough time? Or, like, did you have any thoughts about that? Or you're just like, this is how it's happening?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So a really good resource that I used in the lead up to birth was, what is it? Hang on. The name of the podcast, The Great Birthing Revolution, right?
Oh, The Great Birth Rebellion?
Birth Rebellion, yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
I should know it off by heart by now. Because I listened to I listened to a few of their episodes, particularly around the things like vitamin K, GBS, and a few other things, like other decisions we had to make along the way.
Yeah.
But for partners, apart from your podcast, if there's one podcast one must listen to as a support person, it is episode 28. And it's
episode 28.
Episode 28. And it's how to be a support for a person in labour. It has lots of practical lots of practical things in there. And one of the things that stuck with me from it was, apart from being a cheerleader, you have to have faith in your partner and that they can do this.
Yeah.
Even when they don't, you have to provide the faith for them. Yeah. And so that sort of stuck with me. So when she had doubts, I had none. Yeah. And
it's teamwork.
Yeah. So I, like, from the outset, I had complete blind faith that's what she wanted, that's what she was going to have. And because so much of birthing is psychological, you can't let that negativity, that doubt work your way in. You've got to be, and again, from a psychological point of view, a lot of people get caught up on plans and hopes and dreams and what they want and aspirations, rather than focusing on what is in front of them at the moment. Yeah. And focusing on the now and being present then and there and now. And one of the things that I've learned, and one of the things I like to do is, and so I'm not so flustered, is focus on what is. Not what you want to be, not what you think can be. What is? What are we faced with now? So the reality of the situation at that time was, yes, you're in labour. Everything was going the way it was supposed to. It hurts. But unlike the first birth, where, because she was induced, there was no respite between the contractions. It was wave on wave on wave crashing into her. Yeah. She had no breathing space. So then, of course, that necessitated an epidural. Yep. And then, there was other complications. And, the fact that she had it interference led to another interference, which led to another one later. So
cascade.
it's
absolutely.
a cascade. So this time it was like, no, everything is going as should be.
Yeah.
If you get into that water, I guarantee you, you'll feel a lot better. That's why we got it. That's like, and that's why we got the big one, so I could jump in there with her as well, which I ended up doing in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for anyone who's a birth partner, that episode 28 for the Great Birth Rebellion.
Indeed, yes. Yeah.
Is the one. If you're going to listen to one, listen to that.
Yeah,
after this
amazing.
one.
After this one. Yeah, I'll make sure to link that specific episode
in the show notes.
In my episode description. Yeah. Do you have any final words for partners and dads out there that, something that you wish you could have heard or anything like that?
So another podcast that I like to listen to on the trip to work is How Other Dads Dad.
Oh, okay. Is that with Hamish Blake?
It's surprisingly down to earth, easy to listen to, very funny. You get lots of perspectives from a whole range of different dads in different circumstances, and they will touch on their birth stories in and out. And one of the things that came up they talk about is holding the space.
Okay, yeah.
And it comes up, I think, Stan Grant's episode, perhaps? I can't remember. But yeah, that phrase, holding the space. So you need to advocate. You need to be the cheerleader. You need to be that foundational, solid rock to cling to when, you're getting assailed by pain and doubt and drama and don't be afraid to advocate and say, no, we need some space, we need some time, can everyone leave? Set boundaries, enforce those boundaries, know what you want and know what you don't want, and you don't know what you don't know. And don't be afraid to ask and reach out, but advocate for your family and back yourself and your partner. That's the biggest one, I think. Being able to advocate and back yourself and your partner. Because no one else will. They'll do what's convenient for them. Yeah,
for the system. So. Absolutely. That's amazing. So many good points. And I feel like I need to write it down about the car. You spend more time thinking about what car you're going to buy. That's so true. Thank you so much, Robert, for your time today. And I really hope this helps somebody out there listening.
Me too. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.